This is an introduction to populations and samples. So, how can you use a survey to make conclusions about a general population? This gets into when people take surveys for anything. Usually people can't survey everyone. And so we survey a small portion of the population and then use that information to make generalizations about everyone. So here are the definitions for what a population is and what a sample is in this context. A population is an entire group of people or objects. So it's the entire group that you may want to know some more information about. And a sample is part of the population. So it's a smaller portion of the population, okay? So here's an example. If you had all students in a school and you wanted to know information about the students in that school, the entire school worth of students would be your population. Now, within a school, you have a class of students. Now, the students in that class, let's say you survey your math class, the students in that class are the sample and they represent the population. So they are part of the population that you get to question in order to make conclusions about all students in the school. So let's take this for example. You want to know how many students in your school are going to the volleyball game. You survey 50 students. 10 are going to the game. The rest are not going to the game. Identify the population and the sample. The population is who you want to know about. So the population, in this case, you're interested in knowing how many students in your school are going to the volleyball game. So you're trying to get information about all of the students, right? But you only survey 50 students. The 50 students that you have chosen, the 50 you actually work with, that is the sample. So the sample in this case is 50 students. And the population is students in your school. Now, the reason that we sometimes only survey small portions is that it's unrealistic to survey an entire school of students. You're not going to be able to ask every student in the school if they're going to the volleyball game, but if you ask enough students, then maybe you'll get a good idea of about how many students will be there. And so that's what I mean by can you make any inferences? Can we look at this? Well, 50 students were surveyed and 10 said that they were going to the game. Is it possible to say, well, if 10 out of 50 are going to the game, then how many out of 100 are going to the game? Well, that would be 20. And so could you say that 20% of all students are going to the game? Maybe. Maybe not. It depends on the students that you ask. If you only asked 50 athletes, then that would be a biased sample. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So a reasonable sample is selected at random. I just touched on this. If only athletes were asked and 10 out of 50 were attending the volleyball game, then does that mean that 10 out of every 50 students in the whole school are going? Probably not, because the athletes are probably going to be more interested in the athletic event. So selected at random is a really good sample. Okay, so if students are randomly selected, you're going to get a better overall picture for all students. It has to be representative of the population and large enough to provide accurate data. So if you only asked 4 students and 2 of them said, yeah, I'm going, are you able to conclude that half of the students in the school are going to be at the volleyball game? Probably not. The more students you ask, the more representative of the overall picture your survey is going to be. So your sample is more credible if it's random, if it's large, and it represents the population well. The results of a reasonable sample, and this is an important point, are proportional to the results of the population. So reasonable samples can be used to make predictions about the population, and we'll be touching on that later. So say you want to estimate the number of students in a high school who ride the bus. Which of these 4 samples is the best, and why? Well, we could survey 4 students in the hallway. We could survey all students in the marching band. We could survey 50 seniors at random, or we could survey 100 students at random during lunch. So which of these would be the best sample? Well, if I look at A, this 4 students. Now, is that large enough? We kind of just talked about that actually very specifically. 4 students is a very small sample, so it's not going to be representative of the population. It's not random. It doesn't say that it's random. It's too small. So we're going to say no. This is not a very good sample for this. How about all students in the marching band? If you just ask students in the marching band, you are leaving out probably 80% or more of the student population. Is this representative of the entire population? It's not. And in fact, it's not random either. So we're just going to put that this is not a random sample. Okay? How about 50 seniors at random? Well, this is random. Sort of. There are 50 seniors. If only seniors are asked, seniors are actually probably more likely to drive to school, right? So the people who ride the bus are probably going to be the younger high school students. And so leaving out 3 grades of students in high school, if you want to know the number of students in high school, do only seniors represent that population? No. So it's not representative of the entire population. Of all high school, okay? But 100 students at random during lunch. All students go to lunch. 100 of those students, that's a large sample. It's at random. So yes, that is why. It's all 3 of those things. So of the 4 opportunities to sample students, the choice D, 100 at random during lunch, is probably your best bet. In an attempt to understand the behavior of carpenter ants, Jacob logs data while observing 50 ants in his ant farm. What population is Jake studying, and what is his sample? Well, what does he want more information about? Carpenter ants. Does he just care about his carpenter ants? It doesn't seem that way. He is interested in studying the behavior of all carpenter ants. So the population, the overall large group that he wants to know information about, is all carpenter ants. But what is his sample? Who is he actually working with? Or what objects or what is he working with? He is working with 50 ants in his ant farm. So would he be able to make any conclusions from this? Possibly, probably. The behaviors of those 50 ants are probably going to be pretty representative of all carpenter ants. However, those 50 ants may not have been randomly chosen. 50 ants might not be enough to understand the behavior of all ants in a colony. There are definitely more than 50 ants in a full colony. There may be thousands of ants, so they may behave differently. But he might get a pretty good picture. Never know, right? But anyway, in this case, 50 ants would be the sample, and the population would be all ants. And lastly, I would like you to try to determine with me whether you would survey the population or the sample for these 3 scenarios. The first is you want to know the average height of 7th grade students in the United States. Are you going to be able to survey all students in the United States? All 7th grade students? Is that reasonable? No, it's not. So, you're not going to be able to survey the population. Yes, you're interested in knowing about all 7th grade students. However, you're not going to be able to contact every single 7th grade student. So you're going to have to take a sample of those 7th grade students in the United States. Perhaps you'll survey all 7th grade students in your school. That's going to be a large population. It's not necessarily random, but it's still a sample. It'll give you a better idea, a clearer picture of all 7th grade students in the United States. But you would not be able to select the entire population. How about example B? You want to know the favorite types of music of students in your homeroom. So the population you're interested in here are the students in your homeroom. Is it possible to survey all students in your homeroom? Sure, of course it is. If you have 20, 25, 30, maybe 35 students in your homeroom, you would be able to survey those. That's reasonable. To take a sample of something that's small already, you might not be able to actually represent the entire population. In this case, our population is not that great, meaning not that large, so you would survey the population in this case. For example C, you want to know the number of students in your state who have summer jobs. Now, a state is smaller than a nation. However, if you think that you are going to be able to survey all students in the state to see if they have summer jobs, again, probably not very reasonable. Okay, so in this case, it would probably be a good idea, again, to take a sample. A random sample would be best, of course, one that represents the entire population, and it would have to be large enough, right? But surveying the entire state is probably not that reasonable. So I would say for A, you would take a sample. B, you could survey the entire population. And for C, you would survey a sample.